everyone. My name is Catherine, and welcome to Unordained. And if we've never met before, I'm really glad to meet you. And as the banner says, I am an ex evangelical pastor and I am a current atheist. And I went through a deconversion process about 4 or 5 years ago from religious fundamentalism, basically. And it was a rough journey. And when I got out the other side, I thought it would be really cool to make a little network of people like me, former clergy, who are now either atheist or agnostic. And this webcast, is a result of that. And so tonight, I'm going to introduce you to four of the former ex-ministers turned atheist agnostic who are on the unordained panel. And let me see, I think I'll start with Ashley because every other time I wait until the very end to say hello, Ashley.
Hi.
How are you, my girl?
Good. How about you?
I'm wonderful. It's really nice to see you. It's been a long time.
I know. It is
Yeah,
nice.
because I missed last week, right? So,
Yeah, me
yeah.
too.
And someone else joining us tonight is Carrie. Carrie Walker is a former ex-fundamentalist minister, and he's a current atheist as well as an anti-theist. And so tonight, we're going to add another person, Kathy, to the show. Kathy is
Hello,
another one of
everybody.
our hosts. Hi, Kathy. So I'm not going to say too much about Kathy because we're going to jump into her story, but I want to just say I met her. I think she commented on a podcast that I did, and she said, I want to connect with Catherine. And at the same time, I knew who she was. And so we connected and we've been friends since. And I am thrilled that tonight we're going to be talking to Kathy about her deconstruction story. The past few weeks, we here at Unordained have been basically taking turns sharing our stories of how we got out of religion and ended up where we are today. And we've heard about, we heard Ashley's story of how she escaped from basically a control situation in the church. We heard from Carrie a couple of weeks ago. It was a really great interview about growing up in the Jehovah's Witness. And so there's a few there. If you want to check out our YouTube channel, the other videos here, that would be great. I interviewed my daughter a few weeks ago, and she was raised in a really strict home. And so you might get something out of that as well. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Kathy's journey. And I think this is really interesting because Kathy was a very devout follower of Jesus for over 50 years. And now she is out. And so to me, that there has to be a story there. So hi, Kathy.
Hello.
How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm prepared, baby.
Yes. I bet you are. I bet you are.
Hey, it's just I'm just trying to in my head look at the three of you and pretend we're sitting in my living room.
Yes.
Having tea and crumpets and having a great chat. And that's how I
that's what we're doing. Ashley and I brought our tea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so nobody's nervous here.
Yeah.
Nobody's nervous here. We're just chatting.
Yeah, right.
So, Kathy, why don't we start at the beginning of, were you always a Christian, or was there some moment when it entered your life?
In my very young years, we attended a Lutheran church, and my mother's family was Lutheran, and I attended kindergarten, first and second grade in a Lutheran school. And then we moved to another part of town, and at that time my father's drinking got to where we couldn't afford to transport me across town, and pay tuition to go to a private school. So, of course, I heard the basics. It wasn't
Right.
so much a big salvation message, but I knew about God and had already memorized the 23rd Psalm and the Lord's Prayer, and those
Yeah.
things.
Like most of us did in school.
Yeah.
Right. But it was in the Jesus movement?
Actually,
Really?
it was in 1969. As I just alluded to, my father was an alcoholic, a very abusive, neglectful monster, and we suffered abuse of every kind. I'm the oldest of 4 children, who sadly my 2 baby sisters have passed on already, but
Mhm.
because of all of the abuse, at the age of 14, I was placed into foster care for my protection. And so I was in and out of 3 or 4 different homes. I don't remember for sure. And then I was placed into a home that was a ministry of a church in Fort Wayne. It was actually a group home for girls. And part of the rules of the house were you were at church every time the doors were
Mm.
open.
Right.
And so I was there. I did immediately love the place and the group home parents. And there was just something calm there. Well, of course, coming out of such chaos,
Right.
it was nice to have calm. And by the 3rd week, I believe, it was a Sunday night. I was at church. I was in the balcony. They were having a baptismal service, and a young man who was sharing a little bit of his testimony of his salvation experience and how God, because of God's love for him, this is pretty much quoting it, because of God's love for him, he kept him from committing suicide. He was ramming his Volkswagen Beetle into the side of a bridge, and that didn't happen. And of course, he got hurt pretty extensively. But through that experience, he came to know the Lord, he said. And at that time, I just felt a love presence, a something presence, and I started crying. And I went downstairs and I found my foster dad, and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Well, whatever he's got, I want." And so I prayed the prayer of salvation, and that was the beginning of my days. And that was November 16th of 1969.
Wow. Do you mind if I ask you how old you were then?
16. I was
16. Oh,
16.
okay.
Mhm.
And so you jumped in with both feet, I guess?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely did. It was within a very short period of time that the pastor asked me to join in with a group of young people who were mostly from the art school, the Art Institute, and in the area, who were all hippies, and we were all like-minded. He met with us on a weekly basis, and he was teaching us. Well, let me back up a minute. Part of the reason the group grew to a number of 7 was because I got saved on a Sunday night, and I wanted to get baptized right away. Well, they had already started draining the baptismal, so I had to wait till the next week. So the next week, I get the baptism. I get baptized, and afterwards, I'm down front at the altar talking to some people. And this older gentleman comes up, and he had that morning had delivered a message in tongues, and there was interpretation. Well, he came up and laid his hand on my arm, and next thing I know, I'm flat on the floor, speaking in a language I'd never heard before. And everybody's going, "What is this?" So we start meeting with the pastor on a regular basis to go through some biblical teaching on that, and he just felt like there was a purpose for the 7 of us being together. and the like-mindedness that we had. And so
Right.
through Tuesday night, Saturday night was prayer meeting, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Thursday night. I mean, I was there. It was constantly in Bible study or in prayer meeting or in something. And within a few months, the 7 of us, started a coffee house ministry in the old town part of Fort Wayne.
When you were just a teenager.
Yeah, I was the youngest. I was the baby of the group.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a real neat story how we got this building on the landing, which is a very old section of the city. And we did blood, sweat, and tears getting the building revamped to be the atmosphere of a coffee house. And then we were just open. We had bands play on Friday nights, and then the church was affiliated. I mean, we were affiliated, but not controlled by the church. But we'd pack a bus full or cars full of people to take them to Bible study at the church building,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And then we had Bible studies ourselves there at the coffee house, and we'd have. At first, it started out with secular music because back then there wasn't Jesus music. And actually, out of that coffee house came Petra. I don't know if you've heard of Petra.
Of course.
Well, they came out of that ministry.
Wow.
A couple others, and then Nancy Honeytree was another one. She was sort of a Joan Collins type folksy singer. And she came out of that, and it was just, it was a really unique time. And we never advertised, but we never had an empty room.
Right. And so that was like your very first ministry. And then over the years,
you've
done a lot of different things.
I've done a lot of different things.
What kind of, like, I want to get a sense of what kind of Christian were you? What was important to you? What kind of things did you believe? What kind of things did you do?
I believed that the Bible was inerrant. I believed in the Trinity. I was in a church that was charismatic, so I believed in the full gospel, as we'd called it then, you know, speaking in tongues and all the gifts and all of that. I believed in getting up early in the morning to spend time in the Word, that if I didn't do that, I wasn't prepared for the day, that I had to have my armor on, you know, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, you know, all of that was part of the routine every day and pretty much every day. And I believed that church was very strong on prayer. And I was a prayer warrior.
Oh, were you?
Yes. And then later on, as I grew, and then before I became a pastor's wife, and then after, I was an intercessor. And
let me just interrupt for one second.
Sure.
I see Carrie. Carrie's probably not from.
Carrie has no clue.
Okay, I know this is off topic, but I want to know what your church thought of tongues. And do you Kathy is speaking my language here. I was an intercessor. I was a prayer warrior. Is that something that's familiar, like in other circles?
No. As a matter of fact, there was a specific doctrine that don't be offended, but
I will not, I promise.
That the whole speaking in tongues thing was an act of the devil as a means of deception, and that there were no further miracles to be done after Pentecost 33 CE.
Interesting.
So any of the organizations that had something like that, we were to remark as being touched by the devil.
Yeah. And we thought it was,
we heard it.
We were protected from the devil.
Yes, we were.
You guys were the ones on your way to hell.
Right.
Nope. You guys were deceived and taken by the devil himself.
So intercessors and prayer warriors, for me, it meant like we really felt a compassion to pray for people and spend like considerable amounts of time. I mean, at one point I was a pastor of prayer. That's how serious it was for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah, or get
Kathy,
up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
yes,
I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, that must be your assigned duty,
yes,
you
yeah.
know, because
So
that's it. And also, we were taught, I don't know if you were, but we were taught that tongues was a special language
yeah,
that nobody understood, especially the devil could not understand
Yep.
tongues. And so you were encouraged to pray in tongues as much as you could because God was the only one who could interpret it.
God
And
and
so
the
he
right.
knew what
angels.
you were praying from your heart.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Hmm.
We believe the
not
same thing.
not all charismatic. I call myself a former crazy charismatic. I mean, there was just some wacko things that I look back now and think it's
Yeah,
wacko, but
me too.
yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, very strong in that. And then I was always, um, I was a good student in high school, and I always loved researching. So I got into Bible study and learned early on some of the tools to use. The thing that I want to mention that seems so interesting to me as I got closer and closer to the time of my deconstruction and was really questioning things is that I remember working with a woman who was, um, what is it, Tuck is? Mormon. And
Right.
she was discussing the things that she could and could not do as far as what she could read and not read. And I remember feeling so sorry for her.
Yeah.
And then I think I begin to see that, oh my gosh, I'm limited to, what was it, Baker House, Tyndale, Zondervan. Anything that was published by those publishers was safe for me to read, but I didn't dare go outside the cage
Yeah.
to read anything else that wasn't prescribed. And Carrie, you probably experienced that as well, that you
Oh, yeah.
have prescribed materials, and what it's doing, it's that circular, I was studying and studying and studying, and Catherine, you and I shared one time about the many hours. I probably could have two PhDs
Yeah.
in the 50 years that I
Yeah.
spent in studying, but it was constant reinforcement of the same things, the same
Yeah.
basic context of everything
Yeah.
over and over and over. What do they call that? Circular or pre
Oh, confirmation bias, you mean?
Yeah,
Confirmation
yeah,
bias? Yeah.
right. I'd go
Um,
looking for something, and of course I'd find it because
yeah.
that was being reinforced. And
Yeah.
so it was a few years ago that I started having weird, like, there's got to be more.
How many years ago?
A few, a
Okay.
few. I would say about 10 years ago, I had a situation, a physical situation that caused me to be hospitalized. And I had to lose my job. I mean, I couldn't work anymore because it was debilitating. And so I had time to think, and of course I was still doing my 8 o'clock in the morning. Then it was 8 o'clock. Before that, when my kids were in school, I'd get up an hour before them so I'd have my quiet time and everything. But I continued in the process of doing my devotions and doing my reading and doing my studying. And, I'd have my books spread out all over the table and, continuing to dig in. But it was like something was just not connecting anymore. There was just a longing for something that was different.
It's interesting, that you talk about that because it's true. Like I spend a lot of time studying too. So, but it is very much like that you you are taught something, and then you go out and you study everything that confirms, what you just learned. And so there's really not a whole lot of new information that's coming in. It's
Mhm.
recycled, right?
Right. I mean, I know there's a whole lot more out there that I
Yeah.
could have learned. I'm not trying to say that I knew it all,
Well, yeah,
but
yeah,
I know, having been from the other side of the pulpit, that 90% or more people who sit in the pews don't even read their Bible every day.
it's true.
I mean, I think a Gallup poll said 10%, if that,
Yeah.
will pick up their Bible and read it every day. So
Wow.
that's I mean, to me, that's hard to imagine. If you're going to commit yourself to something, you're going to commit yourself to something, but that's part of my personality, and that's
So
part of who I am.
how many times would you estimate, because I know that it's impossible to say, but how many times do you think you've read the Bible from cover to cover in the 50 years?
In 50 years, I would read 2 or 3 books at a time. I would go through and read it to myself. Most of the time I read scripture out loud,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so that I was
Right,
reinforcing what I was reading.
right.
Faith comes by hearing. So I was hearing it as well as reading it. 1,000? I have no
Yeah,
clue. I mean, I have read
yeah,
it, and I have certain sections that were my favorites and certain that were not. And, I tended to be early books in the Old Testament. And then I guess now I look at it and see I was more a Pauline follower in study than, I mean, the Gospels too, but I tended to go. Ephesians was my favorite book, and Times of Trouble, Psalms, and Proverbs, and
yeah,
the
yeah.
usual.
How do you think you were seen from within your ministry by your other members?
Um, People seem to be able to feel free to come to me for counsel, for advice, and to help them study the Bible. I was not standoffish with people. I always tried to be embracive and inclusive, and I wanted to be there to help people, and I wanted them to know Jesus. And I think um, I think most everybody was comfortable with me.
The reason I ask is because it's one of those questions that we get confronted from time to time after we've deconverted. Is everyone calls everyone else a heretic or a non-believer or some sort of not real
Mhm.
Christian or not real theist. And I suppose I've even heard people who get their doctorates in certain fields immediately start having imposter syndrome because they have a hard time believing that, well, yes, I have a PhD in this subject, but does that really mean I know everything?
Yeah.
And it becomes this a bit of disconnect, especially when you're deconverting.
Mhm.
One of the fears you have, or can be, that maybe I wasn't a real believer, and therefore maybe there's some other religion I should be looking into.
Mhm.
Um, do you have any thoughts about that, or did you ever feel this way?
No, I knew I was in 100%. I never felt drawn to any other religion. Even since I've deconverted, I don't feel a need to check out any other religion. I do not call myself an atheist because I don't think I know it all. And at
Yeah.
some point, everything could change. I no longer believe the Bible is literally the truth. And part of that is because of the research I started doing. When I really started looking for truth of the truth, I was challenged several years ago. There was something in the community that was going on, and people would go out and pray with people and, try to get a bunch of people saved. And then it was like, then you kind of left them. There was supposed to be follow-up, but most people didn't follow up. So there was no discipleship. And that was always a big thing to me, was discipleship, to teach people. And because I was discipled, I mean, I had great discipleship from day one. Discipleship was there. And so that was something that I finally opened my home to have a discipleship class. And what I did that was so different, I guess different, I don't know, is I started taking them into, these are 66 books. This was not written. This isn't how the Bible was written. It didn't look like this.
Right. Yeah.
It didn't even have verses and chapters, and, trying to help people to understand what this book was. Well, of course, I can't teach it if I don't know it. And so I start researching even more about this book and finding out some truths about the background of the book that's outside of Baker House, Zondervan, all the safe places to read. I started questioning and digging in for myself.
Was there a linchpin for you in that regard?
I just think part of it was, I was really seeing, after my divorce, which was about 6 years ago, and having been in the ministry and then married to a pastor and then divorced, and then that's such a stigma. And it was, something I never talked about into the community. There's very few people I discussed. It's nobody's business, really. It is what it is. And I visited a few churches, and I was seeing things differently. And of course, I did not see the function of a biblical church happening in any church I visited. I didn't see the pattern of what Scripture taught as a biblical church happening.
Yeah.
In churches, in my community. And I'm probably going to tick some people off, but there's a lot of cliquishness in churches. Also, in our community, it seems to be, it's not a great big town. It's not little, tiny, as Catherine has, but it's, not a great big city. But the Christians tend to like to church hop, which means they're at a place for a while and it's going real good, and something happens that they don't like. So then they'll pick up and leave and go to another one, see if they can find something better, and they'll stay at that one. And then some people will even get involved in doing stuff, volunteer to do stuff, and try to make changes from the inside out. I've seen that a lot. Well, that doesn't work. And then seeing, I worked with Pat Robertson's ministry for 3 years, and I worked with Nora Lamb's ministry for a year, and I've worked with some ministries besides just being in the church, and I saw things that happened behind the scenes that if the supporters knew, it was heartbreaking and hair-raising, and it wasn't, and it was appalling to me, because call me Miss Goody Two Shoes, but I was just, that was just me. I was dedicated, and I'm not going to on purpose go do something. I'm not going to hurt somebody or try to do something to make money off of somebody, or that's just not how I am.
Yeah. And you were surprised when you saw that they were like,
oh my goodness,
regular people who were messing up like the rest of us. And
I'll tell you, my first, I think in my mind when I went to work at CBN, I thought, this is a little bit of heaven. This is going to be a little bit of heaven. And my first day there, all my bubbles burst, and I got home and I thought, you know what, Kathy, anywhere you work with people,
That's right. That's exactly
there's
right.
going to be conflict and
Yeah.
jealousy and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. That's just
Yeah.
part of our humanity. So
Yeah, it's exactly right. I
Mhm.
see things now when I look back at people in the church. I'm no longer surprised when theists are assholes. Because you know what? Sometimes I am too, and we're
Yeah.
all just human, and we
right,
are all just doing our best to get, to live a happy life,
right.
So,
It's
because
kind of a double-edged sword in its own way. Because
Yes,
on one hand, you have this
yes,
doctrine that, God's spirit is supposed to move you to act with certain
exactly.
fruits of the spirit, and then you don't see those spirit
right,
emanations anywhere.
Yeah.
And
right.
the
That was
cognitive dissonance is bad.
Yeah.
that was another part of a jumping off place for me, Carrie, was when I was really seeing the emphasis on the spiritual gifts and the pride of being blessed with a spiritual gift, which are temporary according to 1 Corinthians 13. They're all going to pass away. But the fruit of the Spirit, that is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control,
Ah, dang.
weren't
I'll
Wow.
say it.
talked about a whole lot and weren't visible. And I'll tell you, churches are full of gossips and just
Yeah.
backbiters, and it's just horrendous.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
worse than some of my work situations. I saw it.
Yeah.
And I thought,
Yeah.
wait a minute. Wait a minute. You're supposed to be representing Christ
Yeah.
to the earth, and this
Yeah.
is your representation. And it was not just one or two churches. In 50 years, it was every church I was at. I was in Pentecostal churches, charismatic churches, a part of Methodist churches, Presbyterian churches. What was another one? I lived on the East Coast several years, and there were I don't remember if there were denominations of some of the different churches. So I've been around the different denominations to see that humanity is what humanity is, and yet when I started really searching, we were always taught that the Old Testament was the same thing as the Hebrew Scriptures.
Right.
And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to start studying with a rabbi. I did go to a Messianic congregation for a while, but then I got online with a class, and then I started listening to different rabbis on YouTube.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, well, I want to learn. I want to hear what they say about the things I've been taught.
Yeah.
Did anyone know that you were doing this?
No. This was my investigation.
That is so interesting. You really are a truth seeker. I mean, obviously, you've been out every day to look for. You wouldn't settle for something less than the truth.
No, I came to a certain point in my life where there had been so much falseness and so many lies, and I just thought, I'm just not going to believe a word somebody says anymore. I'm not going to just listen to the man that's standing up behind the pulpit and take that as gospel.
Yeah.
Because more times than not, it was his opinion and not gospel.
Right.
And then in anything, I mean, but I'm the kind of person who likes to be challenged to study.
Right.
Not everybody does that. And I recognize that,
Right.
But I think that part of the responsibility of people like me is to share what we've learned.
Yeah.
Because there is a different side to the story other than what I was, I always said that I was in a bird cage.
Right.
and the door was closed for 50 years.
Yep.
Somebody fed me. Somebody brought me water. You know, I had freedom in the cage to flutter around, but I'd
Yeah.
look outside and see there's so much more, but I wasn't allowed to participate in that because it was bad and evil and it was going to hurt me.
Yeah.
You know, so I had to be content inside the cage.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and so I started researching what's outside the cage.
Right.
Well, one of the biggest things, if I can just touch on a couple things,
I would love. I was just going to ask you. Yeah, tell us some of the things that you learned along the way. That
one of the things
your opinion.
that I particularly wanted to know, since you know we were taught that the Trinity was from the beginning. And that when God said, let us make man in our image, you know, that us meant the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Well, that's when I hit up the rabbis and I figured, look, these guys are Jews.
The originals.
They speak it at home every day. They don't just go to school to learn it. So they know all the implications, the innuendos and everything. And,
right.
You know, there's so much more to the Hebrew language than pulling out your Strong's Concordance and finding, oh, this is what that word means. No.
Right.
You have to take into consideration, is this the feminine? Is this the masculine? Is this in this order of the sentence? Is it, I mean, it's like a science, you know? So I got one of the rabbis to just simplify for me one word in Genesis chapter 1. How do they see Elohim? How do they see God? And I could say we were taught that God was plural, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so I wrote it down, and I wrote it down for tonight just so I wouldn't forget any of it. The plurality in Genesis 1:26 is not three different people. The plurality is another way to say is all powers are in El being God, or Elohim is the Almighty One from whom all powers exist. So the plurality is the powers. The plurality is not in the persons.
Okay, so
And
your
that-
concept of the Trinity just went down the toilet.
knocked me on my butt because I thought, oh my gosh, does that ever change everything I've ever been taught? You know? And then the concept of original sin, I mean, I could take years on that, but just going back and really reading in English those first 3 chapters, what we have been taught that we inherited sin is not right. It's
Right.
not what the book says. But it works for religion.
Yeah,
It works for a way to control.
yeah,
That, I mean, can you really imagine a God who supposedly is a God of love, who's going to create somebody to fail immediately?
yeah.
I mean, a God who's supposed to be all loving, all caring, like from day 1, day 2, whatever day it was, day 7, 8, whichever day it was, that they ate of a fruit. And because they did that, you know, you're banned from me and you're all going to hell.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and
Original sin. Yeah. That's a big one.
it is.
And
It
when
is.
you, it was one of the last draws for me as well. But when you start to logically look at original sin and creation and the fall of man, all of that, it really falls apart really quickly. I mean, it is like, it's not even like a house of cards. I mean, you can't look at it too closely or it'll fall apart.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Right.
And
Yes.
once it does, the rest of it, like if there's no original sin, now we got a problem with what are we going to do with Jesus? Like what was the point of
Mhm.
Jesus coming? And then, so
It's interesting you bring that up because one of the rabbis said that, so many Christians believe that the only way of forgiveness for Jews was a blood sacrifice. And he said that's not true
That's
at
what I
all. That's
believe.
not true. And he brought up to me a scripture that I've always been fascinated with, and that was out of Genesis chapter 3, when Cain and Abel were fussing, and God came to Cain. Cain killed Abel. Did Abel kill Cain? Killed Abel. I'm sorry, jump the track there a minute. And God said basically to him, "You have anger in your heart, but you can master it." And he had a choice to make. God, supposedly God was telling him, "Look, this is what you're thinking about doing, but you don't have to give into this. You have a choice to make."
right.
And he made the choice to kill his brother. And then in Deuteronomy, we have these lists of, is it don't 18 and 19 or so, I don't remember the chapters, but you have one whole chapter of lists of if you obey this, and this.
Yeah.
But if you
The
don't
blessings and the
obey,
curses, yeah.
the blessing and the
The
curse in it.
blessings
So
for
that
believing, the
says,
curse for not, yeah.
wait a minute, there's choice here involved.
Yeah.
And that there's consequence involved. But then there's also looking at the Old Testament as that was written for the Jews. That wasn't written for Christians,
Right.
And
Yeah.
then jumping ahead, one other thing that was big to me was my nephew, we lovingly know him as Oz, but
Right.
he's Austin, had told me a couple books to read, and this is about a year ago. And so I dug into the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Okay.
The Epic of
So
Gilgamesh.
hang on one second now. So Oz was an atheist.
Oz
Right? Oz
had
was an atheist at the time.
about 3 years. Yeah, he's been
Right.
about 3 years. He's left the church,
Right.
and
so
then
what happened for you? What happened for your very Christian aunt and an atheist nephew? How did he get you a book, and how did you read it?
okay. Well, I had been going through for 2 or 3 years lots of questions,
Right. Okay.
and I had been reading, like, one of the first books I read was actually a book by Francis Chan, and it was about the church, reimagining the church, I think was the title of it.
Okay.
And he had a great big church out in California, was getting ready to build a new church, and he felt like God arrested him and said, "Don't do this. This is not what church is."
Okay.
And so he's going through his own searchings.
Okay.
He's still a Christian, but he does things a whole lot different. He's now does home church stuff instead of the big church
Okay.
thing.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
that was a big beginning in my searching, in my reading things. And I'm going, oh, so there's other Christians who are questioning some of the stuff that's going on. And then I read Frank, I can't think of his last name. He's also a Christian, but he is questioning, wait a minute, there's stuff going on that's just not right,
Okay.
So anyway, I had been going through lots of this stuff internally. And when Austin was brave enough to step out and, no more. And of course, he kind of went through his angry phase, as we all do. And my sister, of course, I was real close with my sister. I'm actually the one who led my entire family to the Lord. And so she would call me, crying about her Austin who had left the faith. And,
Oh, yeah.
so I was aware of what he was doing. And then he has a program on YouTube. And I watched a little bit of that. And then I called him one day and I said, how about I come up to Fort Wayne? Let's meet for lunch.
I
And
bet he just about fell off of his chair.
well, he didn't know what to expect because
My
he didn't
religious
know I
aunt
was
wants to go for
questioning.
supper.
Yeah. And I
Okay.
remember the look on his face when he came in. I was already there and I said, Austin, I'm not here to convert you. And so we just started talking and I started opening up to him about the questions that I was having because I knew he would understand. And we had a great conversation. He says that he watched me leave in my car and he sat in his car for 10 minutes going, what in the hell just happened?
I can
My
imagine.
Aunt Kathy's deconverting,
Yeah.
But then he kind of opened the door for some resources of books. Once I got one or two, then I started really searching out on my own of things to read and listen to. And I've got a huge list of things. I've spent the last year pretty much pulled away from everybody and everything. Actually, what I was trying to do was undo 50 years in a very short period of time.
Right.
And you can't do that.
You cannot.
I was reading, listening to YouTube, reading books, watching.
Yeah.
I was just, it was, if I could have stayed awake all night,
Yeah.
it was 24/7. I wasn't having any fun.
Right.
And then I started, Austin and I talked about me doing a program on his channel because of my age and
Give it a plug.
knowing that there were people in my age group. I know there are people who are sitting in the pew,
Yes,
don't
Kathy.
believe a word, don't believe anymore, but because of the friendship fellowship aspect of it, they don't want to lose it all.
Yeah.
They don't want to lose the family. They don't want to lose their identity. And that's hard. I've lost a lot of friends. I have a very small group of people I've found who love me for who I am.
Yeah.
And I haven't, I am the same person I was.
Yes.
The only thing I may do different now is when I go out for pizza, I might have a beer out in public.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm not any different. I still,
Yeah.
I still like to do my sewing. I still like to do my reading. I still love people. I mean, nothing's changed.
And you're
But
still a lover of truth.
I have a, I must have a mark on my forehead that says, the big A, but not for adultery, but atheist, that I've left the church or something. But I found so many scriptures that were not original.
Right.
I have found that, things that were taught to me that I found were untruths was like, it's been over 100 years that it's been a general consensus among biblical scholars, both Christian and non-Christian biblical, saved and unsaved, whatever. Moses didn't write the first 5 books, up until, a year or so ago. Last time I went to church, whenever it was, Moses was the one still being taught. Moses did it all. Well, no, he didn't.
Right.
And then back to Gilgamesh. Oh, this was the biggie for me. The Epic of Gilgamesh is at this point thought to be the oldest document in the world. It was uncovered in the Mesopotamian area. And so it predates the Bible by at least 1,000 years. Okay. And it wasn't written on paper. It was on clay tablets. And reading through that and getting to, I believe it's is it called Book 11 or Tablet 11 or whichever, the 11th section of it is the whole story of Noah and the ark.
Oh, that's
Written.
that's another one. Yeah.
Written 1,000 years or more before the Bible. And I'm going, oh my gosh, what else have I been taught that's been out there forever? You know? I mean, it was just, that was
that the straw that broke the camel's back?
I mean, that was like the big opener for me. It was like, I knew that I had been taught things that were not truths, that they were part of this cycle, you know, the cycle. And knowing that a lot of of those who were pastors over me didn't know. It wasn't like on purpose they were trying to fool us. They didn't know.
No.
And the sad thing is a lot of the I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but a lot of the younger people who are in leadership roles in the church, they don't know even the Bible, let alone to be having the responsibility of being a pastor.
Well, how would they know? I mean, they're kept in the same circle that
Exactly.
you are, right? They don't
Well,
get
and yeah. And then the other thing that gets me, when I was married to a minister, I never let people call me Pastor Kathy. That wasn't my role. And yet I see so many young ones who get off. It's an ego thing. Believe me, there's lots of ego in ministry. And, you know, so-and-so pastors, and then, you know, husband and wife.
Yes.
The wife probably didn't even go to school. I don't know. They don't know. And then, you know, to me, I'm trying to summarize 50 years, guys. I'm sorry. There's a lot.
Okay. Take your time.
There's just so much that I've seen. I freaked out early on when I found out that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John weren't written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They really weren't eyewitnesses. They were written anywhere from 60, 70, 80, 90 years after the fact.
Yeah.
And I'm going, holy schmoly. And I'm supposed to think that this is the inerrant word of God.
Yeah.
I'm a storyteller. I write short stories. I can bring things to life and have conversations. I mean, I can write out conversations.
Yeah.
And then the next thing, I mean, I'm starting to use more and more critical thinking.
Right.
In my processing.
Right.
And I'm going, okay, so how many other references can I find outside of the Bible historically for Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was this the big one? Was this the big awakening for you? Was the whole Jesus?
Well, that's
thing?
when I knew I was done.
Yeah.
When the only reference for the person who was supposed to be the savior of the world.
Yes.
Josephus mentions him a couple times, but not as savior of the world.
And those are considered forgeries.
No mention of Jesus in any historical documents found to date.
Yeah.
Outside of the Bible.
Yeah.
And then I get to thinking about Paul. You know, the Apostle Paul. And I thought, what difference is there in the vision that Paul had on the road to Damascus than the vision that Joseph Smith had, who started the Mormon Church?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
What difference is there? Who was there to see it?
Right.
Only those that were told were there. Right. Only what Paul said.
Yeah.
And to verify who he said he was.
Yeah.
How do we know he was a Roman and a Jew and I mean, all
Yeah.
of the stuff that's said by him. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie,
You're
but
not
I
wrong.
don't think there's much that was provable about the
No.
Apostle Paul, other than the big thing that this is just me personally,
Yeah.
out of not taking anybody else's opinion, but I think Paul's involvement with Rome has a lot to do with the Roman Church's dominance. I mean,
it has a feel like he injected himself into a narrative that was already there, and he just tried to play an important part. And there's even a record of Paul and the other disciples at the time arguing with each other.
Oh yeah.
So it's not as though they were coherent in their story. You know, they each wanted to go their own way in a way. They both claimed they wanted to support Jesus, but you know, they thought that the support aspect, how that was to happen, was to be different.
Right.
And so you're not wrong. It's you're breaking out of that bubble that you were in, where you know, A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D, and D leads back to A, and you just accept them all because it seems to make sense.
Yeah, I think I think that even the using the oh dang it, what's the word I want? Sheep. That we're sheep. Dumb, stupid sheep that just follow along, have to be led to where to eat and drink. You know, I mean, I hate that that's something that was used, that we're just dumb sheep, or that you have to be born again, become a baby, be an infant. You can't take care of yourself. Here, let me feed you.
It's called label theory. The idea that if you give somebody a label, and they will either reject it or try to live up to it. So in our group, we saw people who were praised for their sheep-like ways, and they weren't goat-like ones. You know, they were in the truth. They weren't worldly, and these labels meant something. They gave you a sense of belonging and community, and so you embrace them without realizing what it is you're embracing.
Right.
You're embracing civility in the kind of don't think, just get along. You know, like, yes, you're a good neighbor, but are you good for anything else?
Right.
Sort of
Right. And can you really truly make somebody else understand what you think you believe?
No,
you can't. I didn't know, in my 50 years, I hardly knew anybody who was truly evangelistic. And
belief is not a choice. Like, by definition, a belief is something that you think is in accord with reality for some reason.
Right.
So,
It's not a choice. Yeah,
it's not a choice. So, for example, the big God question: if you don't actually hold that God is a part of reality as a statement of truth, then you don't believe God is part of reality, and that's what a theist is. And anyone else is an atheist if you don't think God is part of reality. So,
you're left out of having choice. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say about belief not being a choice. That was a big thing for me to grasp, because in my church circles, we said that it was a choice. We believed that we were choosing to believe. But now that I'm an atheist, I realize I did not choose to become an atheist. It's just I'm an atheist as a function of my the intake of information that I got. I just, I am not convinced. So it was, belief is not a choice. You're either convinced of something or you're not. You could be convinced for very bad reasons or very good reasons. But yeah. So Kathy, okay, so 50 years you were in the ministry, you were a pastor's wife, you taught the Bible, though, and then you mentioned that you went through a divorce as well. That must have been that's a huge life change. What would you say to your friends who would think that you are where you are today because of the hardships that you went through? Like, are you where you are now? Have you left the church because you are hurt? because
Oh,
you've been
no.
offended or you're angry at the church or yeah.
No, that has nothing to do with it. And really, prior to my divorce, there was distancing
Right. Right.
that I felt, or that I mean, I've probably been deconstructing much longer than I realize, and the more I look
Oh
back
yeah.
on some things, I mean, the more I can see where I was asking questions
Yeah.
of stuff. Healing. I remember having a discussion with my brother about the name of Jesus. I was attending his little home church for a while, and I was studying and focusing on how people used that little phrase, and it was just like, these are the magic words that you pray.
Yeah.
You add these on to the end of a sentence, and it's going to
Yeah.
make it come true if you pray in Jesus' name.
It's
I
funny,
thought,
yeah.
how many times have I prayed in Jesus' name over 50 years? I've never seen a true miracle ever.
Yeah.
And I've been around a lot.
Did you think that you saw a miracle and just now you see that it wasn't a miracle, or did you just never believe that you saw a miracle?
I never believed that I saw a true miracle because
Okay.
it was things that were explained later with medical intervention.
Right. Yeah.
And
I believe I saw lots of miracles in my 20-something years, but when I look back now with a rational mind, I can see that they were every single one of them, even the most, you know, amazing looking one seemed like, is very easily explained in the natural.
yeah.
Very easily. Yeah.
Or people, I've heard people say, well, we miraculously got this building. Well, no, you've
Yeah.
publicly been praying
Yeah.
about the need for a building, and somebody's heard it, and somebody's called you, and little things are put together, and voila, God did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, that's not how it worked.
Right.
That was people talking to people,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
things worked out. And
Yeah.
I just when you realize that there are 45,000, the last Google check I did, 45,000 different Christian denominations in this world, and
Christian.
they all
Yep.
just Christian,
Just Christian.
and they all believe wholeheartedly that their way is the only way.
Yes.
Something's wrong with this picture.
That's right.
Something
Must
really
mean that
wrong.
this doctrine's not as perfect as we originally thought, huh? Communication is pretty bad.
And if there was a God, he's pretty good at providing his spirit to make it concrete in the minds of believers, because you'd think he would get it right every time if they were all believers. And we would all have that one thing that we share that we all know is perfectly from God.
Exactly.
But everybody thinks it's different and defines it differently and feels it differently. So
Yeah.
God communicator he sucks.
He's a really bad communicator. He's really bad. Somebody got really mad at me one time on Facebook and called me some really bad names because I said that I was a much better communicator than the God of the Bible. But you know what? I'm going to stand by it, because you know what? Every single person listening to me, if you speak English, knows what I'm saying. And so I'm a better communicator.
And I'm a better person than he is, because I would stop a rape from happening, or
I have a better sense of justice than he does.
Yeah. I think the thing that when you look at it with different eyes, I mean, like, nobody ever had a good answer for where Cain's wife came from.
From the land of Nod. Surely that's not confusing.
Yeah. Well, no, I heard it say, well, Adam and Eve had more children. And I've gone, oh, so God says incest is okay?
Yeah.
If he married a sister, then incest is okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
you know what else is interesting about that is that it is absolutely impossible for the human race today to have come from two people. It would have taken at least 6 different
genomes.
Yes, to get us where we are now. So the fact that Adam and Eve and the fall wasn't real is, for me, it was almost enough to make everything fall apart.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One of the big things in the churches I was involved with was prophecy.
Yeah.
The big thing with prophecy and the prophets and seeing, when I look at it, especially from a charismatic perspective, and see that the majority of the time, the people who were the prophetic ones were the ones who were people who had strong will to control others.
Interesting.
And so, of course, they're going to say something that God told me. Oh, and I hate to hear that. Well, God told me. Well, God told me to, pick the yellow toothbrush today. Well, God told me, or, God held this parking spot for me. Well, God cares more about your parking spot than the dying people around the world. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I think sometimes Christians kind of get to where we're so special.
Yeah.
We think we're so, the thought is we're so special. We're God's kids. We're the king's kids and all of that.
Yeah.
and that's not truth.
Yeah.
That's, none of that is truth. It's been stuff that's been, hell is not real. Hell originally is not what's taught today.
Yeah.
The Hebrews, the Jews look at it. Hell, Sheol, that just means the place of the grave.
Yeah.
And Ecclesiastes, from ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I mean, I forget who it was that came up with the afterlife. And was it Tertullian that came up with the Trinity? I think it was Tertullian that came up with the Trinity.
Okay, yeah.
I've got so many running through my brain. I mean, I've got notes here, but I'm not going to just read out of all of my notes.
Well, how about this? I know we're like a little bit over time, and that's not a big deal. We can go as long as we need. So tell me, it could not have been easy, though, for you to make this transition. That must have been a very difficult thing. Do you feel like you left the church, or do you feel like you left your concept of God? And is it the same thing to you? Like, where do you stand now on your on the God belief?
Let me see if I can sum up.
Might have been a complicated question.
No, I'm just trying to.
Do you believe in God?
Not
Yes or no?
Not the biblical God. I don't
Right.
know if there's something out there. I don't think there is. Not in the
So do you
concept that I've had for all these years. I don't think there's a God out there that controls everything and
Right.
that directs my steps. And I mean, everything I've ever had to do, even if I prayed about it or prayed concerning it, I always had to be the one to do the action. I think a lot of times people think it's just going to magically appear. I'm just going to pray about it. What's God's will for my life? Well, I'm just going to keep praying about it. And, 30 years down the road, you're sitting on the same chair. I'm just praying about it, looking for God's will. And, it's like, get up off your butt and go do something. What's your natural inclination of something to do? You can't do that to yourself.
Yeah.
I think our visions of God when we're deconverting have been very similar. When I've talked to other people about this, is that you go from the theism that you've got to the idea that maybe if your theism is wrong, maybe there's a different theism that's right, and you do a little searching, and then you find out that they don't make sense either for probably the same reasons.
Yes.
But you're not quite ready to give up the idea of there being something like a first cause.
Yeah.
So you find yourself regressing to a point of deism, and but then at some point you recognize that what is there that God needs to be the answer for?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is it not? Is it just a conjecture that God is the solution to this problem that you've invented, or is it? Does God hold explanatory power for the question?
Yeah.
And if God is just a cure-all, you can certainly God did it. That's how did Adam and Eve have incest that many times without producing genetic freaks? Well, God did it. They were closer to perfect, so
Yeah.
He made sure that didn't happen. And that sort of thing. It's like, well, what did the animals eat on the ark? Well, God did
It's
it.
magical.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
magical thinking.
Right.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is I think when I came into Christianity, I was coming from such a broken state. I didn't know what love was. I didn't know what a healthy family was. I didn't know the role. I mean, all I did was live every day to survive. I didn't dream.
Yeah.
We had lots of times we didn't have food. We didn't have electricity. I moved every year of school. I was in 3 different schools in 2 different states, just the 5th grade alone.
Wow.
So that I had no security. I had no anything. And so when I heard that God loved me and Jesus was going to make my life so much better, of course, that's what I wanted. Everybody wants a big papa in the sky or your magic genie or somebody who's going to make all your woes go away, promise you a beautiful afterlife. And that is just not reality.
Yeah.
No.
And it took me a long time to realize that, Aunt Kathy, tell them the story about you telling me about praying for your bedroom furniture. Oh, he's never going to let me. We discussed this when we went out for pizza that day.
Okay.
I was in the mode of doing, we used to call it antiquing of furniture, but now it was the, when you take old furniture and you.
Like
Restoration.
repurpose it. Yeah. Yeah.
Antique
Refurbish.
it,
Yeah.
Well, refurbishing, but there was a certain look, and I always wanted the really old furniture. And I was looking through a book one time, or I was looking through Pinterest one time. It was just me in my bedroom, and I found shabby chic. That's what I'm trying to think.
Yes.
The shabby chic. And I found a dresser that I loved. And I just said out loud one time, God, this is what I'd love to have. I mean, it wasn't a prayer. It was just out loud. Okay. So a week or so later, I'm going through and see a yard sale. And I go to yard sales every once in a while. And I saw one of the pictures, and it was something that I really liked. And so I went over to the girl's house, and her name was familiar to me, but I couldn't put it together. And then when I got there to pick it up, she said, and I told her my name, and she said, my grandma worked with your ex-husband. Well, then I knew her grandma, So I get the one piece home, and I get a phone call a little bit later, and she said, Grandma says she's got the other beautifuler piece, the dressing table, beautiful mirror, and all that. That's just sitting in storage, and she'll sell it to you for a really cheap price. So I got this furniture, and really, to me, it was free because I had gotten money for my birthday. So it didn't cost anything. I had a friend who was an antique dealer, and he said, this is Victorian furniture. And he said, Kathy, it's worth about $1,500. And I mean, it needed some work. And so I worked on it. And then I found a headboard that was from the same era, didn't match completely. But I had mentioned to Austin when we met for pizza, I said, I wondered if that was an answered prayer.
Yeah.
And he said, hello. Anyway, he says, let's talk about that a minute. Let's talk. Was that an answered prayer? Are there other ways that could have been answered?
Yeah.
Was it preordained?
Yeah.
That you see this picture and you go, and now it's funny. I mean, I painted it a real light pink, shabby chic. It's beautiful. It's not manly furniture at all. And I thought, it's mine. I can do whatever I want. If I want pink bedroom furniture, it's not gaudy pink.
So you thought God was answering your prayers that you got that furniture?
And that what's always been, he always teases me about that.
Yeah. But that's, that is a point though, because as Christians, we were conditioned to see everything. Like there were no such thing as coincidences. Everything was God. Or if you thought about a friend and within a week that friend called, that was God.
Yeah. Or
you've been on my
it wasn't God,
lately.
it was demons. Demons. I could tell you I can tell you stories of deliverance services that would just make you cry.
We're gonna have a whole program on this. I can't wait. In the new year, we're gonna have a program on the crazy shit we used to all believe.
I can contribute a lot to that.
Yeah. And I think I've been saying for so long that it's going to be called The Crazy Shit We Used to Believe that I'm pretty sure that's the only title we're going to have to stick with. So,
well, I don't, I'm not, if people can choose to believe whatever they want.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not out proselytizing.
No.
To take people away from what they believe.
Right.
If that's what makes you feel secure.
Yeah.
And, that's what you have to do for you, do it.
Yeah.
I just know that I feel like I found a truth.
Yeah.
A truer truth. I believe that as soon as I made that decision to let go, that the first thing that I felt that was different was the fear that I used to live with was gone.
Yeah.
Immediately. Yeah. It was gone. And that was an unusual experience.
You probably didn't even know it was there.
I knew I wasn't like afraid of going to hell or anything like that. I've never had that kind of fear, but, and I don't fear that now. I haven't had with all the turmoil going on in the world. Oh, what if I'm wrong? And this is really the end of the world. Well, they've been saying that for how many thousands of years, it's just part of life cycles and things that happen. And, every generation has their proclamation that this is the end. And that's, and Jesus.
Well, I'm personally very glad that you've never had to go through that fear, because that kind of fear is what results in people leaving their faith and being angry.
Right.
Anger is an actual natural response to injustice.
Right.
And you recognize that you've been mistreated and lied to or misled, even if it wasn't intentional. You lived a life that wasn't true, and it was passed off to you as though it was true, and you recognize suddenly that it wasn't true, and you get angry because that was an unjust way to have to live your life by these rules that were just imposed on you.
Right.
And so I understand why some people call it the angry atheist stage, but in all honesty, it's a reclaiming of your proper sense of justice, and that justice was violated. And righteous indignation is something we're told we're supposed to have in the truth, when we're believers. So why can't we have unrighteous indignation now?
Yeah.
I think the thing that, I had an anger, but not a real boiling anger, was more I was actually married twice. And the first one wound up being a situation that was just like my dad, which is very typical. You go out of an abusive situation into another one because that's all you know, unless you've had some kind of, intervention. And then my second marriage was much longer. I was in that for 30 years. And in the first one, with the first time there was abuse, and I went to my pastor and was told, basically, I came out of there feeling like it was all my fault, that I was the object I was being abused, and it was my fault that I was being abused.
Yeah.
You know, which is devastating now. And then with the other one, in a situation that was one that nobody, I mean, I'm not going to go into details. These are personal things that happened. I know I had every biblical right, if you want to say that, to get out of that situation. But because I had made a vow to God, when I took my wedding vows, I stayed in what I look back and say a living strangulation for so long.
Wow.
And then, you know, with that, and then with the time of, you know, my getting ready to do my deconversion, is also seeing that my relationship was very strained with my daughters, and realizing that a big part of that was because they had deconverted a long time ago, and I was the one, my religious beliefs were in the way of us having good communication, because I didn't realize how judgmental I was, and, you know, all the things of, I'd look at how they did things, and, you know, all of that. And it was like, you know, they're not lining up with A, B, C, and D here. And then I mean, I had them on Vintage Explorer. We talked the other day, talked yesterday. I mean, we're slowly rebuilding. Actually, I would say we're actually starting to really build something, because it was never healthy before.
Yeah, that rebuilding process is
Hard.
It is hard. It takes work. It takes effort. There's a lot of relationships to rebuild, and a lot to mend. And like you, my kids were raised in it, and they were adults when we got out. So I think there's some unique challenges that come with that when you deconvert after you've already indoctrinated your children. And it's been a journey for me as well. Tell me what your life is like now. You mentioned your program. You didn't mention it enough. So tell us again.
I took 2 months off. I was so I was so overwhelmed that it was stressing me out physically. I wasn't sleeping.
Right.
You know, and trying to get things ready to do a show every week, and who to interview and all that, and then studying all the time, and it was just too much. And so I contacted Oz and said, hey, besides, I'm much older than you, Oz. You know, I need some time off. And so, and then still processing my sister's death from July. And that was another, do I go into that at all now or no? The healing prayers and all that.
That's a very that was a really hard time in your family. You can.
It was very hard time. Yeah. My sister had been, I mean, she's been diabetic for a long time. She was diagnosed bipolar several years ago, had mental challenges, and she had been a worship leader for many years, and then developed Meniere's disease, and eventually lost 65% of her hearing in one of her ears. And of course, that means no more worship, no more music. I mean, she could still listen, but she couldn't sing anymore, because she couldn't play anymore, because you can't hear, you know. And so that had to, I mean, I could relate to that, because when I got sick and I had to lose my career, how devastating that was. And that's when I really started therapy. Well, she was in therapy. And anyway, she really, really struggled with that, and with alcoholism. And probably I'm telling things that people don't know. And I'm not trying to blow a whistle, but I don't believe in being a secret keeper anymore. I kept too many secrets for too many years, and covered up untruths. And if we can't be original, and we can't be transparent to try to help other people, then we're just living a lie. And I won't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I lived that lie of things being so wonderful under the, the mask of Christianity. And it's like that destroys you.
Yeah.
It just destroys you because you're not allowed to say anything bad that's happened because, well, then there's sin in your life.
Yes.
Or you're not praying or whatever.
Yeah.
And yes, we had people, Sherry went into a coma one night. She went to bed early and there was over usage of insulin, went into an immediate non-responsive coma, never came out of it, and was no activity, no brain activity. Her other son is a pastor and a kind of charismatic and that's the kind of church, Oz was in and stuff. And anyway, there were people playing music, anointing her with oil, having prayer vigils, saying the doctor was being negative because he was saying there was no hope. Yeah. And after it was over a week that they finally did another brain scan and it showed the same thing. Nothing had happened. No change. She was gone. She was gone from when they picked her up in the bedroom. But seeing the stuff that people were doing and pleading.
There's a total disconnect. There's a total disconnect from reality.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember being in the room one time and there was a whole group of us. They were talking then about what they were going to do as far as putting her into hospice or disconnecting her from all the tubes and everything. And if it was going to be fast or slow. And so there was a big group of people in there. And I was standing at the end of the bed and I just broke down. Well, I think they all thought I was having a breakdown because of my sister.
Right.
But I was having a breakdown because of what I was seeing, this false world that all these people had been living in.
Yeah.
That, she twitched or, she did this or God's going to heal her. Or, the healing's happening. It's just slow. And it's like, she's gone.
Yeah.
She's gone. Can't you see she's gone? Let her go. And that's not to hurt anybody's feelings. They believed what they believed. And I've seen that over and over again.
But it just brings more pain. It doesn't bring peace as far as I'm concerned.
No.
We have a family member who passed away and their family members were praying over her after she was dead, like
to raise her up again.
Raise her. They really believed that they were going to raise her from the dead.
Yeah.
And what does that do? It just
makes it more devastating.
Yeah.
And I've had close friends who've passed away who've, there have been the prayer vigils and everything, holding on to hope and not wanting to let go. I understand that.
Yeah.
But I also understood from Austin and I knew from day one that she was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just wanted him to let her go.
Yeah.
Instead of, it put us through hell. It didn't change anything for her, but it put us through hell. And that was the time when I thought, I am so glad I'm done with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was really so now I live a quiet life.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very small group of friends anymore. I love, now that I've taken my break, I'm doing my sewing and quilt making and things I enjoy. I am working on some plans, going to bring back Vintage Explorer in January, but Oz and I haven't talked out everything. I want to do it twice a month instead of every
she's having a board meeting.
Yes, right.
That's okay, my darling. That's okay.
I just have to set some boundaries for myself.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
And that's something that we've, he and I have talked about, and I'm still in therapy. I'm grateful for therapy. I am sad for people who think that you should not go for therapy, which was something that was told me in Christianity for years and years and years, is that you don't, it's okay to go to the eye doctor and get glasses. It's okay to go to a medical doctor for physical things. Some Christians don't do that. Others, it's okay. But the mind and the brain, which is a big part of the body, it's not okay to go to somebody for help.
Yeah.
And I am a very big cheerleader for mental health.
Yeah.
And we have mental health issues in my family from generations.
Yeah.
And I don't look down on anybody.
Yeah.
Who, Jesus didn't take care of my mental health issues.
Right.
People have no clue how many hours I prayed. For healing and for being able to feel differently and not live in depression constantly and all of that.
Yes, Kathy. Yeah.
And many people who are suffering, thinking that they're doing something wrong, they're not praying the right way.
Yeah.
Go to your doctor, be willing to try medication. It might be different.
Yeah.
It might take a while to find the right thing that works for you, but oh my gosh, it's you need it. And the therapy coming out of the abuse and such a horrendous home life. I mean, that was that was my normal.
Yeah.
And no wonder my kids didn't have a good life besides the craziness of the religion.
Right.
It was, I didn't know how to be a mom. My mom had mental illness when I was a kid. She was being abused. And so I'm all for therapy. Before we close, I have a poem I want to read.
Do it.
Tell me when you're ready. It's not long.
Okay. Let me finish by asking you this question. Are you happy or content now in your non-belief, I guess?
I am happy. I am content. I am loving learning new things.
Yeah.
I read a lot. I do different stuff. I signed up for Wondrium, which is a channel on TV that's college courses that you can take on anything.
Cool.
And it's worth the $20 a month? I don't know. Seth Andrews helps people get a good deal to be able to.
We all give Seth a shout out.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. Love you. I can go in and learn about anything. I'm particularly interested in the early Mesopotamian. That's just fascinated me. And I think hearing Dr. Josh Bowen is on Tang a lot. I just love him as a person, and his wife are great. But that whole area of early civilization is just mesmerizing to me.
Yeah, you really are a learner. You really
are. I mean, I just feel like I could just soak up anything.
Yeah. Especially now that you're out of your cage, right?
It's like the door was opened and I'm free to fly and learn and do and be creative. And I'm learning different ways to express my creativity.
Yeah.
I don't do the typical granny kind of quilts. I'm following different kinds of things to inspire me to do quilts, like stained glass or people's faces, or I've got and I write short stories and I just have someday I'll tell you the amazing adventures of Mr. Lewis B. Dobbs.
Oh yeah, that's the story you're writing.
Yes.
You were telling me about it.
He's my superpower little squirrel. Where that came from, I have no idea, but he's having some fun adventures with his superpowers and his fluffy tail.
Oh, that's cool.
It's just crazy.
So, do you want to, we mentioned resources. Before you read your poem, would you rather talk about the resources or do you want to do that after?
Well, yeah, if we want to put up what I felt like would be good to do, and some of it is for friends of mine who I know are watching or will be watching that know that I'm a researcher, that I don't just jump on a bandwagon.
Right.
But I
You
have to
didn't do this
know.
lightly.
No.
Right.
No. And for others who think that, who thought that I just did it, oh, you just got upset. Somebody hurt your feelings, and so you've left the church, and
Yeah.
all that.
Like
I
it
thought,
wasn't-
no,
like it
I
would be
wanted
that
to
easy.
make available just a little bit of some of the resources and the people that I've listened to, I've read,
Right.
and
give us your top 3. I know there's a lot. You just mentioned Dr. Josh Bowen.
Dr. Josh was a big one. Bart Ehrman is another one. There's 2 rabbis, Tovia Singer and Simon Jacobson are 2 rabbis I did a lot of listening to, researching with. There's I can't remember the name of the Hebrew university thing that I linked up with for a little bit.
There we go.
Oh my! And when I did research, I didn't do just those who were not Christian, but I mean, and this isn't everybody. This is just a few that I can pull up. I did not write down titles of books because I figured, if
those are some really fabulous resources.
Yeah. But I mean,
we can make that available.
Read and read and read, and I love Joe Baden's stuff, and he's just very interesting and very open. The psychology stuff, I've thought if I was younger, I would go back to school for psychology. I really love that. Some of the YouTube channels that I've listened to that are not flighty, but worthwhile. It was through Myth Vision, Catherine, that I met you.
Oh, yeah.
I emailed Derek and said, Derek, I've got to meet her.
Yeah, Derek is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and he always has quality people on.
He does. He has really interesting people who know what they're talking about on there.
Yeah.
Although he had me on there, so I don't know. They're not all that great.
Well, that was a bad day.
We don't all know what they're doing.
But that's just a little bit of
Excellent. All right, let's hear the poem.
This is a poem that I was introduced to just a week ago, but I've adopted it. It is called The Autobiography of Eve. It's by a woman named Ansel Elkins. Wearing nothing but snakeskin boots, I blazed a footpath, the first radical road out of that old kingdom, and went towards a new unknown. When I came to those great flaming gates of burning gold, I stood alone in terror at the threshold between paradise and earth. There I heard a mysterious echo, my own voice singing to me from across the forbidden side. I shook awake, at once alive in a blaze of green fire. Let it be known, I did not fall from grace. I leapt to freedom.
Yes! Yay! Yay! We're all fellow leapers with you. That's great. That excites me. I just, Kathy, is it too soon to say I love you? Ever since I met you, I feel like I've had such a connection with you, and we have so many shared experiences. I really enjoyed listening to you tonight and hearing some of your story. Is there anything that you wanted to, is there anything else that you wanted to say?
I
What would
think
you say to your friends who may be listening to you now? Your old Christian friends.
I would say the same way I close out my Vintage Explorer, and that is always be kind and always explore. Good night.
That's great. That's great. All right. That's a wonderful place to stop right there. Thank you, Kathy.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Carrie.
All
We
right.
will be
Thank
back
you.
here again next week, and we are going to be interviewing Kurt. Is it Kurt next week? I believe it is.
Yeah.
And another really interesting story. We have a few more deconversion stories to. I'm looking forward to them all. So, yeah, same time next week. And thank you all for joining in.
Thank you.
Have a great
Good
week.
night.
Night.
Bye, everybody.